Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Mormon Stories Podcast. I'm your host, John DeLynn. It is June 9th, 2017, and I am very excited for today's interview. Today, we're interviewing Jen Parkinson, and Jen's someone who I recently met because she came and bought a chair from me and got to know her a little bit. But she's got a really cool story. It's one of those epic stories. We're going to try and cover it in about 2 hours. Maybe we'll go a little bit over, but it's got a lot of cool parts to it. And just so you can know ahead of time what we're going to be covering in this interview, I'm pretty sure Jen was raised devout LDS, so we're going to touch on that for a bit. But Jen entered into a mixed orientation marriage, meaning that she married a gay man, and that marriage didn't work out. And we've never really covered that before. We've never interviewed someone who is in a mixed orientation marriage. And so this is going to be, I mean, maybe we have, but this will be kind of the focus of the interview. So we're going to talk about that as the first part. After the divorce, Jen had some experiences as a divorcee in the church. So that's going to be part two, is kind of what it's like sometimes for divorced single women, or at least Jen's experience as a divorced single woman in the church. That's going to be kind of part two. Part three is when Jen remarried to her current husband. At some point, he left his faith. And so Jen's going to be able to tell her side of the story as the believing wife of someone who leaves the church. And that's something we need to cover more on Mormon Stories. And then finally, Jen's in the super close-knit family that's really Orthodox. And now that she's decided that the church isn't for her, and she started to kind of make her own decisions, just talk about how the dynamics in her family have changed and how she's kind of struggling with that, and how she and her family are kind of struggling with that. So that's kind of what we're going to be covering. And really quickly, before we totally jump into it, I guess I'll just make a few really quick announcements. As always, we are hosting several events for Mormon Stories, and I just wanted to make sure those of you who are interested know about it. July 7th through 8th, we're going to be in Dallas having a really fun retreat. So if you're interested in that, please sign up, mormonstories.org/events. The Dallas retreat's coming soon. August 11th through 12th, I'm really excited to announce Julie DeAzevedo-Hanks and I. She's a believing active Mormon. Her dad's Lex DeAzevedo, who wrote Saturday's Warrior. Together, we're going to be leading a mixed faith couples retreat. So where one member of the couple is faithful and active, the other is no longer believing. It's going to be a 2-day retreat specifically focused on that scenario. We're hoping to get at least 20 couples there. So if you're interested in that, please sign up. Slots, there's still a few slots available. September 14th and 15th, we'll be in Seattle, Washington. I'm excited about that. October 20th through 22nd, we're going to be at a resort in Sydney, Australia, at the invitation of several Mormon Stories listeners there. They really wanted us to come, so we decided to do it. And then November 9th through 10th, we'll be in the Bay Area in San Francisco, and we're really excited about that. And of course, fall of 2018, October, we'll be doing a cruise to the Bahamas because Mormon Stories listeners have requested it, and we want to have some fun there. So those are the announcements. We're in the middle of doing a few podcast series. We're doing one on what we're calling Losing the Lamanites, for people who were raised and told that they were Lamanites, and then they learned that Lamanites didn't exist, or they no longer think of themselves as Lamanites. We still maybe have a slot or two open for someone who fits that description if they've got a really good story. And we're also doing a series on people who are in the middle way trying to make Mormonism work as semi-believers, as unorthodox members. So we're kind of in the middle of that series as well. We've got some other series going on, but if you're interested in appearing on Mormon Stories, please just email us at mormonstories@gmail.com, and we'd love to consider you for the podcast. So enough with the announcements. Without any further ado, I want to welcome Jen Parkinson. Jen, welcome to Mormon Stories.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Anything I got wrong in the introduction?
No, I think you were spot on.
All right. So let's just start talking about your upbringing in the church a little bit. To what extent was it a traditional or a non-traditional Mormon upbringing?
I grew up in a completely Orthodox home. I was the bishop's kid, very active in the church. My family was very, very active. Early morning seminary, 100% attender at 5:55 in the morning.
Oh, so it wasn't in Utah with release time.
No, I grew up in California, and
Okay.
so it was early morning seminary, and I went every single morning. I went to EFY every summer. I was very, very, very
How many
active.
siblings?
I have 3 siblings. I have 2
Okay.
older sisters and a younger brother.
Okay.
So there's 4 of us.
And your dad was bishop during the time you were growing up.
Yeah, he was bishop. He got called to be a bishop very early. I think he was in his late 20s the first time.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, very early. And then all through my high school years, he was the bishop. And then he was in the stake presidency when I left for college. I'm pretty sure he was. Went to Rick's College.
Okay.
Um,
And that's before it was BYU-Idaho.
yeah,
All
yeah,
right.
yeah, a
How'd you
long
like
time ago.
Rexburg?
I actually really liked it. I was surprised. I didn't know anyone that had attended really before I did. And I remember my parents driving me to Rexburg thinking, what have I done? I'm in this tiny, dinky town, but I had 2 fantastic years at Rick's College. I loved it. I loved it.
Any stories to kind of exemplify how devout your family was in the church? Or was it just, like family meeting, scripture study, all that stuff?
Yeah, we had family home evening. My dad traveled a lot, so my mom carried the burden a lot of having regular family home evening. But we had regular family home evening, scripture study in the morning, family prayer. In order to drive the car, you had to be caught up in your young women personal progress. So unless I was meeting my goals with personal progress, I couldn't drive. Um, Extremely devout LDS.
Were
And
you,
my oh, sorry, go ahead.
no, go ahead.
No, I just really happy kid. I just was really obedient.
So you weren't rebellious at all?
No. In fact, my mom and dad said that by nature, I just followed the rules. You told me to do something, I just did it. I didn't argue. I just was very, very obedient.
Did you feel as a teenager that you had a testimony?
Yeah, I don't remember having any sort of divine revelation telling me that the church was true, but I definitely had a testimony. I was that kid that would get up several times in the year and share my testimony. I loved EFY. I thought it was so fun to be around other LDS youth who seemed just really like good kids, because I only had a handful of friends that were LDS growing up. I didn't grow up with a lot of LDS members around, and all my friends in high school knew I was a member of the church and would expect nothing less than for me to be. I didn't swear. They would invite me to parties knowing I would say no, but they wanted me to know I was included. I had a ton of friends, but not really a ton of LDS friends. So
Okay. And did you experience any guilt or shame as a teen, or were you just living so righteously you didn't even have to experience any of that stuff?
I can think of one experience I had when I was a junior in high school, and I was dating a boy, and I remember feeling guilty that I had kissed him and thinking I shouldn't be doing this. And so I broke up with him because I was afraid that, because I enjoyed it, that I thought I'm gonna go too far and I better just stop. And so I broke up with him. I really liked him and I was heartbroken. And then I carried that guilt around for a really long time, not sure if at what point do you talk to a bishop? Did I need to talk to a bishop? And my dad was the bishop, and I carried around tons of guilt about this kid until my sophomore year at Rick's College. I went and talked to a bishop, and I mean, we're talking like 3 years of just not unsure of whether or not I had committed a serious sin, and just about kissing a boy. And my bishop, my sophomore year, said, you never should have come to talk to me about this. You should have let this go years and years ago. And so I think because I was trying to be so obedient to everything that I was being taught, that I felt so guilty about kissing a boy.
Wow.
That's the kind of kid I was.
Okay, that's pretty intense.
Yeah.
All right. So did you end up serving a mission? I think I remember you telling me you did, right?
I did.
Now that would have been before it was sort of everyone serve a mission. It would have been rare for a woman to serve a mission, right?
Yeah, actually when I talked with my parents about serving a mission, I kind of got a weird reaction, kind of like, you're going to be wasting these years of dating, and are you sure that's what you want to do? And it wasn't it's not that it wasn't acceptable. It was definitely acceptable, but not as many people went, and I felt old, which is crazy thinking about it now. But so yeah, it wasn't. I mean, you had to go when you were 21, and so it was a kind of a weird reaction. Just my parents, they were definitely supportive once I got my mission call, but when I was preparing for a mission, I kind of got some mixed signals of maybe I should stick around BYU and date more.
Okay. So what made you go?
I was so happy at the time that I wanted to just tell everyone about the gospel. I wanted to tell them about families can be together forever, and I wanted to just go and share my testimony. And I really wanted to learn Spanish. I was hoping I would go Spanish speaking, and I did. And so I just really wanted to go. And so I put in my papers and I went.
And so where'd you end up going?
I went to New Jersey.
New Jersey, Spanish speaking.
Yep.
And what was New Jersey like?
It was gorgeous. I remember being in the MTC, and there was a sister in our district who she said she was going to the other mission in New Jersey, and said, I want to go and serve in the ghetto. And I said, not me. I want to be where it's safe. I went straight to the ghetto from the MTC, but I loved it. I loved being with the members. I loved speaking Spanish. Surprisingly, New Jersey's beautiful. Southern New Jersey is actually really pretty. And I really liked it. I really struggled the latter part of my mission with mental health. I started having some depression and anxiety issues when I'd been out about a year, and I had some health challenges, and so it wasn't easy. It was not easy being out there, but I worked hard, and I had a good time.
So was it because you felt inadequate? What was the depression and anxiety about?
I think it was a lot of things.
Or is it just chemical?
I definitely, I still to this day, I'm almost 40, and I still struggle with really, really bad anxiety. It's gotten better recently, which will be part of my story later, but I never felt like I was meeting up to my potential and the expectations that were set upon me. And I definitely, it's chemical. There are several people in my family that struggle with mental health. I have children with mental health issues. So for our family, it's definitely chemical as well. So something that I've kind of struggled with off and on through my whole adult life.
Well, I'm so sorry. That's super painful and not fun. Yeah. It sounds like the anxiety probably manifests itself in perfectionism. Is that true?
Absolutely.
And when you don't live up,
I tear myself down. My husband will often tell me, man, you are your worst critic. Give yourself a break. But I've self-inflicted a lot of pressure on myself. Membership in the church also, I think, puts a lot of pressure to be to be perfect and comparing, and so it's been something that I've struggled with a lot.
Did on your mission, did you feel inadequate, or did you feel a lot of pressure? Was that part of it?
I did. I got in trouble a lot in the MTC for not having quiet dignity.
What does that mean?
So back in the day, in like the 90s, there was a late 90s. They gave you a book at the beginning of your MTC experience. I was there for 8 weeks, about locking your heart. So there's a talk about locking your heart from the opposite sex, and then there was this whole thing on having quiet dignity, meaning being a quiet representative of the Savior, being professional, being I don't know how else to describe it.
Avoiding loud laughter and evil speaking,
exactly.
Just being reverent, basically.
Exactly.
And what was your personality like?
I'm loud. I'm loud by nature. I talk very loudly. I walk with a very heavy step. I'm a dynamic, passionate individual who's super outgoing and just in love with life. And that communicated across sometimes as not taking my mission seriously. I got told that I was having too much fun in the MTC. The elders really liked me because I was really fun, and I either laugh or I cry, and I don't like to cry, so I'd rather just laugh and have a good time through life. And I used to get in trouble for that, and I felt so guilty because I felt like I needed to squash that part of me and have quiet dignity, and I wasn't living up to that. We were very numbers driven in my mission, and there were times when we were successful and times that we weren't. And when we weren't successful, it was so hard because I was used to being successful. I was successful in school. I was successful as an athlete. I was successful with
which athletic programs?
I swam competitively for 10 years in California. So I was a swimmer. So.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it was just a hard time. It was just a really hard time.
With swimming, you can kind of influence more probably your success, but in New Jersey, doing missionary work with numbers pressure is probably harder, right?
It was really hard, and there were areas where we lived with English-speaking sisters, and we would work the area Spanish-speaking. So we had to not only find people that wanted to hear the gospel, but we also had to find people that spoke Spanish because we weren't allowed to teach the English. We had to turn them over to the English-speaking sisters or elders. And so it was hard. It was really hard.
So did it get really serious on your mission? Did you think about coming home early?
Yeah, I got really sick. I have what's called polycystic ovarian syndrome, and I had some problems with that on my mission. And I'd been out about 13 months, and I was getting more sick and more sick and more depressed because I couldn't work. And so I actually ended up coming home. I came home early, and I was embarrassed.
That's got to be awful for someone who's anxious and perfectionistic.
It was so hard. So if those people are listening and they came home from their missions early, it's okay. I thought my life was over a little bit because I felt like, oh my gosh, I didn't serve a full mission, but I did. And my stake president, when I got home, said, you served a faithful mission. I got a medical release, actually. So I have a completion certificate, and but it was hard because I felt like a huge failure.
Did the family treat you okay? Did the local ward treat you okay?
Yeah, my parents were awesome. My mom and dad were so good, and my ward at home they embraced me. They loved me. They gave me a homecoming. I got to speak in the Spanish branches in the stake, and so I was not shunned in any way, but I most certainly didn't tell anyone when I was at BYU. I never told anyone that I came home early. In fact, I didn't even think I would talk about that today, but I was really, really embarrassed. So I wouldn't tell anybody when I came home, but my ward knew, and they were great.
Okay. Well, at least you weren't shamed, and
I wasn't.
that's good. Okay. So anything, did you go back to school after your mission?
Yeah, I went to BYU.
Provo.
And yep, BYU
Okay.
Provo.
What years were you there?
90. Okay, so I went fall of 98,
Okay.
and then I went on my mission in January of 99.
Okay.
And I came back in fall of 2000 and graduated in December of 2002.
Okay. All right. And anything interesting or important about your BYU experience as part of your story?
Not really. I mean, I was a student body officer at BYU.
BYU USA.
Yeah, yes. You know what BYU USA is? Yes.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, so I was a student body officer, and it was a great experience. I loved BYU. I absolutely loved it.
Okay. Did you meet your first husband there or after?
No, I met him after. I graduated in December of 2002, and I had been hired to be an EFY coordinator. I had been an EFY counselor the summer before. And so I was waiting because that started in May. And so I graduated in December. So I kind of had a 4-month window of waiting. So I came to Rexburg because my parents lived in Rexburg at the time. And I came to Rexburg and I started working, and a girl at my work set me up with her husband's best friend. And that is how I met my ex-husband.
Okay. Wow. So if we're doing the check boxes here, Dad was bishop, perfect seminary attendance, served a mission as a female when you didn't have to, BYU student officer, EFY counselor, and coordinator. Like, that's some intense Mormon credentials.
Yeah. Yeah. My LDS resume was strong.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. So your husband was gay or is gay, or your first husband was gay. So talk about your courtship and what that was like, dating someone who you didn't know was gay, or if it was just normal.
Yeah. So what's interesting is I had no idea, but once we got divorced, lots of people said, "Oh, I knew the second I met him," but I had no idea. So we met. He was so cute, and we went on our first date, and he was so easy to talk to, and I really enjoyed his company. We liked a lot of the same things. We liked chick flicks and shopping, and I know looking back, okay, but at the time I didn't know. And he was studying criminology in college, and our courtship was lightning fast. We started dating in February, we got engaged in April, and we got married in August.
Oh my goodness. That's pretty normal for Mormons, right?
Totally the Mormon way.
Yeah.
Yeah. Super fast. I was 25 when we met.
That's late.
And I was almost 26,
but you had served a mission, so
yeah. So I had some really bad anxiety before we got married, and I had a sister who separated from her now ex-husband, but at the time she separated from her husband, and I had a complete anxiety attack and said, I don't want to get married. At one point my brother-in-law promised my sister he would take care of her, and look, now they're getting divorced, and they reconciled after, but I got really scared, and he assured me he would always take care of me and would never treat me that way. And even the morning of my wedding, I was sick to my stomach, but I knew that I was doing what I was supposed to be doing. I was supposed to get married in the temple. I was supposed to become a mother. These are the things that I was supposed to do. And so I took a marriage prep class, and I remember reading a talk, and I don't remember who gave it, but it was basically, the gist was, if two people are living righteously, then they can make any marriage work. And I thought, okay, but backing up a little bit, my dad was in the stake presidency at BYU-Idaho at this time when I was engaged. And he had seen a lot of heartbreaking experiences with students and pornography. And he pulled me into his office one day and said, speaking to me about how serious I was getting with my ex-husband. And he said, you need to ask him if he has ever had a pornography or masturbation problem. And I thought, I can't ask that. That's none of my business. And he said, no, I feel very strongly that this is really important because you need to know what you're going into. And so I remember being so afraid of having that conversation. But we were out on a date, and I remember where we were, and I asked him just point blank, have you ever had a pornography or masturbation problem? I have to know. And he said, well, if I have, it's been taken care of. And so for me, I felt like, well, if he's taking care of it and he's squared it with the Lord, none of my business. And not understanding anything about it really, I just accepted that answer. And we got married. And
real quick,
yeah.
So dating a gay person who you didn't know was gay, would you have ever known in terms of like the affections for each other, kissing or holding hands or that kind of stuff?
Yeah.
Was that just all normal?
No, it wasn't. No, it wasn't. And here's the thing. He wanted to be very careful while we were dating. So we set up some rules as far as making sure that we weren't being too affectionate or too physical before we got married. And so he said to me, I'll kiss you goodnight, but we can't ever make out. We can't ever kiss more than just a quick peck on the lips. And I thought, oh, he's being so righteous. I mean, he wants to take me to the temple, so worthy. And so I said that was fine. And but that element to our relationship was never there. It was never there.
Were you attracted to him? Were you wanting to do more than? I mean, were you wanting to kiss? And
yeah. I mean, I'll be candid. I really like to kiss. I think it's fun. It's very different married to my husband today. But yeah, I really liked kissing, and he that was never there. And I was very attracted to him. I thought he was very cute. We have beautiful children. He's very handsome to me. And yes, I wanted that to be there. And even post-marriage, that spark and that desire to kiss a lot was never there after. There was just not that chemistry. It's hard to describe.
What do you know about his story prior to marrying you in terms of his own sexuality that you're comfortable sharing?
Yeah, I don't want to share a lot about his story just because it's not my story to share. And the only thing I know about him as far as that goes was he only had friends that were girls. All his high school friends were girls. He had a couple of friends that were guys, but the majority of his friends were girls. And I thought that was really weird when we first got married, that the friends that he wanted to introduce me to were all girls. But I didn't. That's fine. But I don't know even, I don't know at what point in his journey he determined that he was gay. I don't know.
You don't know if he thought of himself as gay when he married you?
I don't.
Or if
I
he had talked to a bishop about it before marrying you or any of that stuff?
I don't.
Okay, that's fine.
I don't know.
That's fine.
Yeah.
Okay.
I didn't really ask the details once I found out.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So you marry, and then how was it? How was just overall marriage? But then how did you find out he was gay, or what was it like before then? Just talk about what it's like being married to a gay guy.
So,
for you?
yeah, it about 2 months into our marriage, we were not getting along. Um, we didn't get along very well, actually, the majority of our marriage. There was one instance where he got really, really angry at me, and he threw a remote control at me, and I was really scared. And I went up to our bedroom and I sobbed and thought, I don't think I want to be married anymore. But then I took my temple covenants very, very seriously, and again remembered that quote about if two people are trying to be good people, then they can work it out. And so I didn't tell anybody about this. I didn't tell anybody about what being married to him was really like, but um, we fought a lot. And I've got a strong personality and he's got a strong personality. And um, so we clashed a lot. And then, but we felt like we should start our family. And so we did, because that's what, we're taught to do. And I was older, I was 26. And I was 26 when I got pregnant with my daughter, and I was told on my mission when I was 20 that I would most likely never have children. And so I felt very strongly that
Because
if
of
I
the
was,
ovarian cyst stuff.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So a doctor in New Jersey, actually an endocrinologist in New Jersey, told me I would most likely never have kids, which I told that to my ex-husband when we were dating, and he said, that's okay, we'll adopt. I mean, so he was really supportive of if I couldn't have biological children, but I was able to get pregnant. And there was one time when I was pregnant with our daughter that we got in a huge fight, and I drove around for hours and decided to stay in a hotel. My family lived in Rexburg, but I was so embarrassed. I didn't want to go and tell them and stay there. So I stayed in a hotel, but I came back because that's what I felt like was the right thing to do. And I had my little girl, and actually he did great. He helped me a ton. He was really, really helpful once we had our daughter, and he was going to school, and I was working full time, and I worked full time even after our baby was born. And it was when our daughter was about 4 months old, I decided I didn't want to work full time anymore and found a job where I could work from home. And we started managing student housing. Boys, that's important, boys student housing. And when our daughter was about 14 months old, I found gay pornography on our home computer. And that's what started it.
So you're into the marriage how many years by this point?
2.5.
Okay, so pretty early.
Yeah.
Were there any other signs prior to that time that things weren't quite right other than the fights?
At that point, not really.
So intimacy wise, to the extent that you're comfortable sharing, it was just kind of what you perceived to be normal?
Yeah, I mean, I had nothing to compare it to.
Right.
I waited until we got married to have sex for the first time, and so I mean, I didn't know, but I can say that this spark of feeling like there was a level that was missing that actually I didn't know was missing until I got remarried. So I didn't know because, like I said, I had nothing to compare it to.
His attraction for you was lower than probably would have been normal.
Yeah, and he never told me that I was pretty. He never told me that I looked cute. He never there was never any of those kind of things. There was never like flirty, that we weren't flirty. And the level of attraction definitely dissipated over the years. But that also, I attributed it to the fact that we fought all the time, and I'm tired. I'm a working mom, and And so I didn't know what it could be like, if that makes sense, until I experienced what it's like to be married to a heterosexual male. And
Okay.
it's very different.
Yeah. Okay. So you found the gay porn. How did that go?
I was mortified. I called him. He was at work, and I called him and said, "You need to come home right now." And he came home and I think he thought that there was something with our daughter. And at this time, he had a relationship with a guy that seemed too close to be friends, um, but he didn't admit anything, and so that was happening. And then I found this gay pornography. So he came home, and I said, "What is this? What is happening? Are you gay? Just tell me the truth. Are you gay?" And he said, "I don't think so. I don't think so." And and so I went in the bathroom. I locked myself in the bathroom. I was sobbing, and he said, "If you love me, you'll help me through this." Um, I told him he needed to go right to our bishop, that he needed to go and confess everything to the bishop. So we went that night. We had one of our tenants babysit our daughter, and we went to the bishop. And that night, the bishop took away his temple recommend, and asked me, "What do you think? Do you want to stay married?" But we didn't tell the bishop that it was same-sex pornography. We just said it was pornography.
Why didn't you mention that?
I was embarrassed. Because we ended up having to go through counseling, and we went to LDS Family Services, and we needed someone to babysit our daughter while we went, because it was 30 minutes from our house. And I made him go and tell my parents, because I needed my mom to babysit my daughter, and I couldn't keep up this facade anymore that everything's fine. Oh, we're great. And so I made him tell my mom, but again, we did not tell my mom that it was same-sex pornography. We just said it was pornography, because I felt humiliated. I was humiliated. I was so embarrassed.
Mm.
And so the bishop sent us to LDS Family Services, and the counselor at LDS Family Services said, I went by myself the first time, and he said, "I'm going to help you figure out if he's gay." So I said, "Okay." He said, I don't know if I am. I don't know if I am. So the counselor determined that he was not gay, but that he had some dad issues, because my ex-husband kept saying to me, "I don't think I'm gay. I'm just attracted to myself." And I didn't really know what that meant. I mean, I was there to support him. I stood by his side. He went to the addiction recovery program that the church has. He went through the 12-step program. And after he completed that.
What did you do that with him?
I didn't. At the time, I didn't. But later, after a couple of years, we actually both served as missionaries for the addiction recovery program. It became my ex-husband's mission to try to save others from pornography.
Okay.
And so we actually became missionaries. And at that point, then I participated in the women's group.
Okay,
but
that was
when he was going through. Yeah.
Was that after your divorce or before?
It was before.
Okay.
It was after our second.
Let's not jump ahead. Okay.
Okay.
So he's going to the 12-step, and I just want to say there are all sorts of problems as someone with the PhD in psychology with, first of all, associating pornography viewing with addiction. Mm-hmm. Natasha Helfer Parker and others, Kristen, Benyon and others talk about that in so many ways it can be very inappropriate to equate pornography viewing with addiction, especially when it's just masturbation, and maybe a little bit of pornography to masturbate, once every 2 or 3 weeks. Like, there are people who call themselves addicts and who talk about their lives in terms of weeks or months of sobriety as part of these 12-step programs, where it just drives that shame so completely in unhealthy ways. I don't want to get off on a tangent, but I just have to make an editorial comment that
Sure.
I've seen a lot of damage done by those programs, and maybe they've done some good, but I've seen a lot of damage. Okay, so your LDS Family Services therapist then tells you that he thinks he's not gay?
Right. He says he's not gay. He's not gay. He's had some unfortunate experiences being raised, and he's looking to himself to fulfill a masculine need that he didn't have as a child.
Okay, and again, I'm just going to say that is a huge red flag for somebody who's studied the literature on being LGBT and mixed faith marriages. This association with how you're raised and same-sex attraction, my understanding is there's actually negative evidence for that correlation. A lot of people want to say that, and this comes out of North Star and what Ty Mansfield teaches and others, that somehow someone is gay sometimes because they didn't have the right relationship with their father or their mother. They didn't learn the right roles of masculinity and femininity and their identity. And so that develops in them same-sex attraction. And my understanding is that there's negative evidence for that association. But that's what your LDS Family Services.
Yeah. And if you think back to 10, 11 years ago, we didn't talk as much about LGBT, right? I mean, it was kind of like a taboo subject. And I will, with full disclosure, say that I was very closed-minded and didn't know a lot about it. And now I'm a much more well-versed human being to how I feel about the LGBT community. And I've had my mind opened a lot and my heart softened and opened through this whole process.
Sure.
But 11 years ago, you didn't talk about it. And so, I mean, that's what the counselor determined. And I thought, okay, if that's okay,
what was the cure? Did he recommend a cure?
Scripture reading, praying, us going on dates, strengthening our marriage.
Okay. How'd that work? How'd that work?
Well, it worked for a little bit.
How long?
I got pregnant with our second baby.
Okay.
And honestly, looking back when I had my son, we were happy. I felt like we were healthy and happy. We were in a good place. And I attributed it to my ex-husband working really hard to overcome this addiction. That's what I attributed our happiness to, in looking backwards. And that quickly faded.
How many years was it good then?
About a year. Okay.
All right. So he was able to pull it together for a year, and then what happened?
And then I started feeling like he was getting even more and more distant from me. And he was getting closer and closer with men in his life. And at this point in my life, I was very involved in exercise, tanning, working out with my friends, girls' night. And so he would come home from work and I would leave. And so we were not spending much time together. It was a really sad time. And we got further and further grown apart. It was almost like we were roommates. It was kind of a weird time. And he got particularly close with one individual. And I told him I was very uncomfortable with the level of time he was spending with this gentleman, and he got very defensive. And I thought the way to fix our marriage is to have another baby. I don't know why I thought that. I don't know what I was thinking. However, I can't imagine not having my little boy. This is
a third child, right?
A third baby.
Okay.
Yeah. But he saved my life through my divorce, and That little boy was truly a blessing, but at the time I thought that was going to fix my marriage. So I got pregnant with my third baby, and so I had lots of miscarriages, and I had lots of really scary pregnancies, and I was very high risk. And so with my third baby, I had 2 other kids. We were still managing apartments, and I was on full bed rest. And this was months before my baby was due. I was on full bed rest. And my ex-husband was spending more time with this person, this man, than he was spending at home. And I really needed his help. I had these babies I was trying to take care of, and it caused a lot of contention because he wasn't there, and I needed him to be there. And so
And because
fought.
of the gay porn, did you suspect? Was it like, wait a minute, you're getting really close with men?
Yes, and I asked him. I asked him, "Are you looking at pornography again?" Because I could almost tell over the 7 years that we were married. We were married almost 8. Over those years, he would start treating me differently, and he would be more standoffish and mean. He would be mean to me when he was viewing pornography. And so at this time, this was months before our son was born, I asked him again and confronted him again. Are you looking at pornography? Are you and this gentleman, is there something I need to be concerned about? Because I don't feel comfortable. And years before, he had gone on a trip with a guy to New York City, and I thought it was just 2 friends. And come to find out later, he was living a double life, basically. And I got more sick and more sick, and our baby, I ended up in the hospital for days and preterm labor. I mean, it was like a really scary pregnancy. And I delivered our baby, and then our baby was immediately life flighted to a trauma hospital about 30 miles away. And I had a C-section, so my mom took my other 2 kids, and I had to stay in the hospital because I couldn't leave. I couldn't go be with my baby. And my ex-husband never came to the hospital. I was alone for days in the hospital. And I knew my mom couldn't come because she was tending my other 2 kids, and I was totally left by myself. And it was a really, really rough time. And as you can imagine, I was very hurt. And
was your family ever like, where's your husband?
No one ever asked.
Huh.
No one ever asked, actually. We don't in my family, we don't talk a lot about really hard things. It's just kind of how I grew up. But no one ever asked where he was. I had some friends come visit me in the hospital, and those were my visitors. And then when I got released from the hospital, I went down and stayed in Idaho Falls, 30 miles away, so that I could be with my baby. And I got home from the hospital with him, and then 12 hours later, we had to take him back to the emergency room because he was having a hard time breathing. And then they put him on a ventilator and flew him to Primary Children's Hospital. And then my wonderful sister took my 2 kids out of state. My ex-husband drove her and met her halfway, and she kept my kids until I could return home. And then my ex-husband went home, and I was left alone at Primary Children's for weeks while he came home. And then I brought my baby home he was on oxygen, he had a heart murmur, he has a congenital insufficiency. I mean, just the list was going on and on of this really, really ill child I was bringing home, and I was terrified. And then my baby had been home 3 weeks, and we got a phone call that made us lose our housing. I lost my on-site job because of inappropriate behavior that my ex-husband had with a tenant.
Oh, so maybe some sort of male-to-male relationship.
I didn't ask for a lot of the details because I didn't want to know them. And to this day, I know a little bit of what happened, but I don't know the extent. And my attorney knows more than I do. He knows more than I do, but
would this have been a BYU-Idaho student or Rick's?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So was that the first time you received information that your husband had been possibly intimate with another man then?
Yeah, I had no idea. This was the first that I had a real confirmation, I guess, that he was gay. And then
And how many years into your marriage was this?
This was almost 7.
So this was right before the divorce then. So
it was the year before.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. It was the year before. And
what was that? Well, what was that like for you to hear that? And how did he explain it or talk about it?
He tried to make excuses for it, for what he had done. He tried to say that it was innocent. He wasn't very forthcoming. And so I told him that I was going to take our children and I was going to move to my parents, because I had to move immediately. A house that I'd been living in for 5 years, literally had to pack up my stuff and move, because we lost our ecclesiastical endorsement. And so I was told by the owner of the complex that I had to get out, and they were heartbroken. My owner was incredible to me and allowed me to work off site, but I couldn't stay on and be a single woman. You can't do that. And so I took our 3 kids, and as I was packing up our home, I was packing with the intent that we were going to get divorced right then. And so I was packing a box for my ex-husband, a box for me, a box for my ex-husband. And then my dad was a stake president at the time. And so I went to go visit with my dad, and I told him that it was true, that my ex-husband had done this. And my dad is one of the smartest men I've ever been around. He's one of my true heroes. And I respect my dad so much that any and every advice that my dad would give me, I would listen to. And he said, I think you should give him one more chance.
Ouch.
And I thought, okay, are you serious?
And he knew that your husband had been involved in a gay relationship.
Yes. Yes. And yes. And looking back, my dad was wise in saying, you need to make sure that you have done everything that you possibly can to try and keep your marriage intact, so that in the event that it doesn't work, you can go away with a clear conscience. And so I did. We were separated for about 8 weeks. And I told him he could come back to my parents, but that he could sleep on the couch. I invited him back, but that I didn't want him to touch me. I didn't want him to even hug me. I didn't want him to be affectionate with me at all. And not at all.
Because he had cheated on you.
Yeah. And then there was another counselor who specializes in same-sex attraction that happened to be in our ward. So we were then referred to him, and this gentleman said, give me 3 months, and in 3 months' time, I can tell you if he's actually gay. Okay. And so for 3 months, we went to counseling again, and he said, I don't think he's gay.
Oh my gosh.
Yep.
3 months for a false negative.
Yeah, he said, I don't think he is. And in the meantime, um, I was more and more falling less in love. I don't know what the right terminology is, but I was very disenchanted in my marriage, I guess you could say. I I just I didn't I didn't feel like I was in a good place. I didn't feel like we were in a good place. I was very, very unhappy. And so I was trying to search for something to make myself happy. So I started cosmetology school, and I did something for me, and it was amazing. Um, but we found out during this time that our middle child had some severe health problems and needed to have a colostomy bag placed at primary children's. So we took our middle son
That is,
down.
can I just say, that is so much stress for one person. I
Yeah.
mean, being in an unhappy marriage, uh, having 3 kids young, having one with severe physical, challenges, then the infidelities, then the second one with serious medical problems,
Yeah.
and losing
Yeah.
your housing. Like, that's enough to break somebody.
Yeah, so I'll tell you, at this point in my life, my depression was in full swing. Uh
Yeah.
Full swing. Bad, 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 bad. And
And then none of
yeah,
this is your fault, right? I mean,
no, no,
you didn't know he was gay, you didn't you're
this is what
told to
was really
stay with
hard for me
him.
is I was being, yeah. So we take our son to primary children's to have this surgery, and I was terrified. If anyone knows me, they know that I don't do blood, I don't do throw up, I don't do I just I can't do that. And so this was really scary. And they had us learning how to take care of our son. And we my ex-husband and I got in a fight at the hospital. I mean, we were under so much stress, and we got in a fight, and he left me at the hospital to learn how to take care of my son by myself, and I was not okay with that. And it put a very big strain on our marriage. I felt like he wasn't there when I needed him. And we got home from that experience, and my husband was forced, or my ex-husband was forced to resign from his job, and I won't go into the details of that. But he lost his job after we have this infant who is chronically ill, and now this little boy who has colostomy supplies that are $1,000 a month, and now we don't have health insurance. And um, I got very upset, and that was kind of he didn't tell me the truth about the circumstances for being forced to resign, and there's a lot to that story. But basically, it was the straw that broke the camel's back, and I had had enough, and I felt like I can't do this anymore. This isn't the way that the Lord would expect a daughter of God to live. And I told him that I wanted a divorce. And so it had been about probably 8 months since that initial finding out that there had been an inappropriate relationship with a student, to the point where I actually filed for divorce. And then it took another 5 months for the divorce to be finalized.
So you gave him a third try like your dad suggested, but it didn't work out. So
Yeah, I mean, but I could say when I filed for divorce that I had done everything that I possibly could to try to salvage this eternal family. Um, and no, I was not a perfect spouse. I don't want to pretend like I didn't fight back, or that I didn't cause arguments. I mean, I was not a perfect spouse, but I felt like the reasons for our family falling apart were not my own.
sure. Yeah, sure. How could it be? How could that be your fault, right? And no one's perfect in a marriage either, but
No.
still. Okay. So, up through the divorce, was there ever like him coming clean, admitting, apologizing? Was there any of that?
Oh, so that's an interesting question, actually. he never apologized to me, and still to this day has not apologized, but he apologized to my mom. He went into my mom one night. She was in her room, and they had a chair in their bedroom, and he came into my parents' bedroom. I found out about this later, and hung his head in this chair and sobbed and told my mom how sorry he was. But I never heard an apology.
How do you explain that he wouldn't apologize to you?
I don't know. I don't know what the motives were for apologizing to my mom and not apologizing to me. I don't know. I don't know if there was just so much hurt. We were both hurting so badly, and I don't want to underplay his hurt, because I know that he was hurting terribly. No, he wasn't even living at the point being authentic to himself. I don't think he thought he could. And so he was hurting and I was hurting. And but
so he
no,
never,
there's
up to the divorce, he never said, I'm gay and this is really hard, I'm struggling.
Nope. I filed for divorce and speculated and thought, but he never said, at that point he hadn't said it yet.
Okay. Maybe he still didn't want to accept it. Maybe he had, internalized homophobia, homonegativity.
Yeah, it's totally possible.
Yeah. Okay. So you got divorced, and that's not the life you signed up for, right?
No, you don't get married to get divorced. It's not what you're taught growing up, and when you, well, at least for me, I'm guessing they still do this, but in Young Women's, you make this list. And it's this laundry list of all these characteristics and traits you expect to have. And it doesn't turn out that way. The white picket fence, and I did it all right. I got married in the temple. I married a returned missionary. I'm a returned missionary. I did everything that I was supposed to do according to what I thought I'd been taught. And it still crumbled and fell, even though I tried. I attended the temple regularly. I can't even tell you how many times I went and cried in the celestial room praying that I could save my family, and I couldn't.
That must have been just devastatingly difficult time.
It was awful. It was a time in my life that I look back and think, how in the world did I survive? And I had my kids to get up to. And if I didn't have my kids, I don't know how I could have survived, especially my baby, because he was still nursing and I had to feed him. And so I had to get out of bed to feed my baby. And that literally saved my life.
How was your family as a support system during this time?
Oh my gosh. My parents were incredible. I could not have survived my divorce, my losing of my housing without my mom and dad. I moved immediately in there. I actually lived with them until I got remarried. And I was, like I mentioned previously, I was going to cosmetology school and I was going to night school, so 5 p.m. to 10 p.m. So I would be home with my kids all day. And then my mom and dad would feed my kids dinner, bathe them, and put them in bed so that I could finish school. So, my parents were they were the biggest support system, and they were so good. So good.
Did your dad apologize for telling you to stay with your ex-husband, or was it just like, well, he was glad that you gave it all you could?
Yeah, I think he was glad that I gave it all I could, and I think I am to give him another chance.
Sorry, you broke up for a second. Can you say that again? You said I was too. Is that?
Oh yeah. I never regretted giving him that other chance, because so confident at the end that I'd done everything I could. And so I don't regret it. And I know my dad never apologized.
Okay. No, that's fine. It's reasonable to say give your marriage all you can.
Yeah.
Especially when there's kids involved.
Yeah.
Okay. So anything else about being married to a gay man that's kind of worth talking about. I mean, the church still, the LDS church, no law, for many, many, many decades, the LDS church encouraged mixed orientation marriages. They told gay men not to tell their wives that they were gay, to go ahead and get married. They were promised that it would go away if they got married. And people were just told that this can be fixed if your wife is sexy enough, and once you guys have heterosex and kids, that'll fix it. And that became a disaster for thousands and thousands and thousands of Mormon couples. Our study on mixed orientation marriages for my dissertation showed anywhere between 60 and 80% divorce rates, depending on which study you looked at, and super low quality of life ratings, akin to having lupus in terms of the poor quality of life. And that's just for the gay person, not to mention the straight person who's married to the gay person. I'm sure things weren't lovely for you either, right? So for many, many decades, the church encouraged that. Lately, they don't explicitly encourage it, but they implicitly encourage it because they parade Ty Mansfield and others like him on the cover of magazines, and they support North Star, and North Star is very much explicitly pro mixed orientation marriage. And that's, the church really there's only three options for a gay person, right? It's celibacy, mixed orientation marriage, if they're Mormon, or excommunication. I'm unaware of any other option that's viable within the church, because you certainly can't have gay boyfriends and gay sex and be active Mormon. So the church has no choice but to continue indirectly supporting celibacy and mixed orientation marriages. Do you have any final experiences or reflections or recommendations if somebody is considering a mixed orientation marriage? What would you say?
So I've thought a lot about that. I don't know, in my ex-husband's mind, I don't know if he thought being married to me would fix him, or I was almost like a ruse, like, I'm married to a woman, we have children. I don't know, because that's his story. But for me, I after we got divorced, I felt used, and I felt like my life had been a lie. But if someone wants to go into a mixed orientation marriage, I would say, please do so in full disclosure, in honesty. I read a blog right after I got divorced about a gentleman who is gay and a woman who married him.
That's probably Josh and Lolly Weed.
Okay, it probably is. And that she knew, right, going into it, and that she agreed to that. And that she felt like, as long as he still thought I was attractive, then that was fine. I would say, if that works for you, then I'm all about what works for you. You do you be the best you, but please be honest. And I don't know if my poor ex-husband was able to be honest with himself. I mean, I don't know what demon he felt like he was fighting throughout our whole marriage, but I have become so much more compassionate in thinking about, I have a gay friend whose mom keeps saying to him, just marry a woman, it'll be fine, you don't need to tell her. And he said, I would never do that to a woman, because I know who I am, and I know that I'm gay. And so I mean, if it can work for you, then great. For me, I felt like I was living a lie, and it was very, very painful.
And what if someone were to hear you and go, oh, I'm okay because he told me before we got married? Would you still have any hesitation, even if the gay person was up front?
Yeah, I mean, there's a level of intimacy that I have in my marriage now, and I'm not even talking sexual. I'm talking
emotional.
Yeah, an emotional connection. There's definitely physical connection. My husband is a very good-looking man, but it goes so much more beyond that I think, a lot of people, I was listening to one of your podcasts. I can't remember who was on there talking about, we have this idea that I want to marry my best friend, but that it's not always right to marry your best friend. And so, I mean, if your potential spouse is your best friend and you know that they're gay, marriage is so hard. It is hard work. My mom always told me it's hard work, but it's good work. There's just so many facets to marriage that if you it takes more than a friendship to make a marriage work, in my opinion. And so I would say go in with your eyes wide open. No, you can't know what it's like to live with someone or be married to someone until you're married to them, but just go in and be really careful. Be very careful and try and be as honest as possible.
Okay. But and I can just, when I hear you talk about you exercising and you guys living kind of a double life and kind of a contractual marriage where you're kind of living separate lives, to me, that's all symptoms of a lack of emotional intimacy. And even his anger, it doesn't necessarily mean he's a bad, angry guy. But if you're living with someone who should be your soulmate, who's meeting your emotional needs, but instead there's someone you're not really emotionally or even just friendship or intimacy wise attracted to, that can build up a lot of resentment because it can almost make you feel more lonely because I'm married, I should be fulfilled. And instead you're possibly not fulfilled and sometimes even repulsed. There's sometimes even aversion, either emotionally or sexually, with the person who's supposed to be your primary source of fulfillment. And that can generate hostility and resentment, and it can push you to live separate lives. And so that makes total sense to me. Does that sound like a possibility for you guys?
Totally. 100%. 100%. That you just described my entire marriage to my ex-husband. There just was not that connection there and that support there. And we get along great now. We co-parent great. But as spouses, we were toxic together. There just wasn't that foundation that you want to have in a strong, healthy marriage. It wasn't there.
Got it. Okay. Well, let's just say this concludes the first part of our interview. We're going to kind of break it up in segments. So what I'll do is this first segment will be about the mixed orientation marriage. And I'll just say, for those of you who are considering it, just beware. There's somewhere like between a 1/2 and a 2/3 likelihood, somewhere between a half and a 3/4, 50 to 75% chance that this marriage will end in divorce. Very, very low quality of life ratings. Some people do it, and if you can do it and make it happy, that's a personal choice. But anybody who sells or encourages mixed orientation marriages or promotes it, either directly or indirectly, who doesn't warn people about the emotional risks, the sexual risks, the physical risks, the risks to infidelity, and the risks to basic health and happiness, I think they're being irresponsible. And I think mixed orientation marriage should have a big red label saying, warning, mixed orientation marriages can be very hazardous to your mental health and your well-being and to the cohesiveness of your family. That's my editorial perspective on that. Do you have anything you want to add just in closing as we wrap up this segment?
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Mental health, especially, just being aware of it. I totally red flag. But if you can, if that's what you think is right, but all of those things are things that you need to really, really consider.
All right, Jen. Well, thanks so much for telling us this part of the story. Mm-hmm. We'll go ahead and close this segment and thank our listeners for tuning in. If listeners have any comments or questions or feedback, we'd love you to share it on mormonstories@gmail.com, or if you're on YouTube or Facebook, you can share it there as well. We want to encourage, if anybody else has stories about a mixed faith marriage, if somebody's in a mixed faith, a mixed orientation marriage and they think it's amazing and wonderful, I'd love to do that interview as well, potentially. So reach out to us. And again, as we always do, we just want to thank our Mormon Stories listeners for their support. If you donate to Mormon Stories or the Open Stories Foundation, those donations are what makes all this possible. So if you support us, thank you for keeping this alive. If you don't, please consider a donation, because it's how we survive. In the U.S., your donations are tax deductible, and they go towards supporting the foundation and its mission, and we're transparent in our finances, and we'd love your support. So with that, Jen, thank you for part one of your story. We're going to come back and talk about being a divorced mom, single mom in the church. We're going to talk about your remarriage. We're going to talk about your second husband losing his faith, how you reacted, and then we're going to talk about how things have changed with your immediate family since you experienced your own faith crisis, and kind of what that's like. So stay tuned, everybody. And Jen, thanks again for coming on Mormon Stories.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
All right. We'll see you guys in part two. So stay tuned. Thanks, everybody.